Hello, everyone. I am Valentin Moser from projectfelis.org. And in this video, there will be two parts. The first part will be a presentation that I was also holding at the first International Mammal Watching meeting in Spain in 2022. And in the second part, I will show you how I use iNaturalist.org as a tool for mammal watchers, how I use it to report my sightings, but I also how I use it to plan trips and get a lot of fun out of reporting my sightings and using the site. Now, welcome to the presentation about our mammal watchers building big biodiversity benefits, or a why and how to report your sightings. Now, if you think back to your own sightings, how did you report them? And which medal are you getting, therefore? Are you getting the paper medal? You didn't do any reporting, you kept your sightings to yourself. I really hope nobody here does that, of course. Are you getting the bronze medal in a non-standardized way reporting? You wrote a trip report, for example, for mammalwatching.com. You let the local NGO biologist know what you saw. Did you report in a standardized way without proof, meaning to a database, for example? Or even in a standardized way with proof, meaning you not only submitted your observation, but you also attached the proof, such as a picture or a sound recording of the observation you had. Or even in exceptional cases, exceptionally interesting observations, you published your sighting in a scientific journal. Now, there is one more level, it's the platinum medal, creating your own website for mammal watching. We cannot all do that, of course, but we can all see that we get on silver medal or gold medal standard to report our data. Standard what? Now, to report your data in a standardized way means that there is some form of setup to make the observation data scientifically valuable. It's always collected in the same format and always with date and place and name, and ideally also with a proof. Why is proof so important? We are all wrong sometimes, and even if there is an uncertainty or a split or any changes a few years later or many years later, you can go back to that proof and have a look and maybe reconsider what you saw, or some people working with this data can reconsider what you saw. Now, why is this important? A lot of different things and programs use standardized data. For example, monitoring programs, red list assessments, and a lot of conservation in general. It is very hard to do any meaningful science without standardized data. And with that science, then the conservation of the species we love so much, we had great fun to observe, this conservation can be improved. Now, to report your sightings, you have to choose a platform. That's not always very easy, but exactly for that reason, we came up with the TAPIR protocol. TAPIR, T, time. How is the data collected? Is it stored long-term? Do you trust the platform to store your data in long-term? Is it, for example, is it a business model or is it a non-profit organization? Access, who has access? Do the other users have access to your data? Do the relevant authorities have access to your data? Protection, your protection of your privacy, but also the knowledge of guides and the protection of animal privacy, so to say, if it's a threatened species or a particularly sensitive place like a bat roost. In good reporting platforms, you should be able to obscure your data. Information, is it passed on to GBIF? GBIF is the Global Biodiversity Information Facility, which is kind of the global database for biodiversity data. And it's very important that all the data is passed on to GBIF, because only then it's really accessible to all the scientists and conservationists out there. And last but not least, recording. is there some benefits for you? For example, is there live lists or stats, or can you organize your pictures with this platform? Now, there is some frequently heard limitations. Let's call them limitations. It takes too much time. Feel free to report only select sightings. And you might not know which of these sightings are, of your sightings are very valuable. Basically, you can follow a bit the red list from the IUCN on that. If you have red listed species, for example, endangered or even critically endangered, it's very important to report your sightings. Also, if the species is data deficient, that means they don't have enough data to assign a status, but the species might be really endangered. Outside known distribution range is a good criteria, of course, as well. And don't forget, extraordinary claims require extraordinary proof. So if you have a sighting that is well outside of the known distribution range, it's very, very good to have a proof, like a picture, or at least a very, very detailed description. I don't want to share locations. That is a very valid concern, but most of these platforms have options to report obscured or even private, so nobody else sees where you saw that animal. And in some cases, it is even very important that you do report obscured or even private, because species might be threatened by poaching, or it's the knowledge of guides. I would really like to stress that reporting your sightings is often the best and one of the easiest ways to help conserve the animals we love so much. So I think there is not many reasons not to do it. And I honestly enjoy it a lot as well. And I hope I can show you a bit more throughout this video why I enjoy it so much. Don't make the TAPIR sad. Follow the protocol if you're unsure, and make the best out of your data. Well, this brings me to the last part of this presentation, the introduction to iNaturalist, which is also the start of the second part. I think iNaturalist is great. It has many benefits for the mammal watchers, I think. So it's based on pictures, which is not always ideal with mammals, but usually it's possible to get a picture. If you do have that picture, you have an algorithm to help you with identification. And what I really like about iNaturalist bycatch is welcome. So you don't need to know what you've seen. An identification such as bird or insect is completely acceptable. There is some more specific benefits. You can get rodent ID help from Venkat Sankar. Venkat is really a passionate mammal watcher and an expert in anything small and brown, I would say. I think it's the best. Others might disagree. Observation.org is another popular option. Choose whatever you like. Don't forget to follow the TAPIR, and that way you can make sure your data is in the best place. And with that, I would like to show you some stuff on the actual website itself. So here we have an overview of my observations and just the mammals. And we can see the last observation was from Eurasian beaver. We get a very visual representation of where I have taken pictures of mammals and uploaded those. We have a species list. Of course, these are just the species that I have actually managed to get a picture of 7 times, for example, from red fox. But also if we scroll down, it gets more interesting, of course. All in all, the live list gets sometimes updated because these websites are usually quite good with taxonomy. So if there is some changes, I get a notification that I should review my observations of this particular species. And then I can see if I get an armchair tick or not. And there is not much better thing than to sit on a gray day in the office and get an armchair tick out of my observations. So I think that's a great benefit, that your live list is actually also taken care of in terms of taxonomy. Now I want to show you what I do before a trip. Later this year, I'm going to South Africa, and my main target is aardvark. So I can see where people observe aardvark, and we see a bit of a concentration of observations here. We can zoom in all the way and see what's up there. And we see a very familiar name to many of you, Marik Safari. And that's where I have booked just a little while ago. So I think I made a good choice. We can also search in this particular area only, and we can see that people see aardvark there, and not just den and tracks, but the actual animal, which is of course very exciting. One of the prime targets. Well, that is true for me as well. We can then click on the species itself. We can get more information. We can get information to seasonality, for example, which can be useful in some species. When do people actually see this species? Takes a bit long to load now. They're not too interesting with aardvark, I would say. We see the top observer as well as the top identifier for that particular area, which is sometimes really useful. I know how to identify aardvark, but there might be a bat or a rodent later on from that area, and then I can do the same with a rodent or a genus of rodent, and I can also use the top identifier and then tag them in my observation to ask for an opinion. Now we can see more pictures, quite a few things to get myself familiar with the species. Usually if you dig here, there will be some tracks and other indirect observations as well, which is very interesting to learn about the natural history of such a species. Now, what do I do after a trip? My last trip was in the region of Vienna. I can do a little search there and see how that is going. So again, the internet is a bit slow. We see 17 species is the current count. We can check out some observations from these two apodemos because they are quite difficult to identify. Now, this one, someone agreed. I can also click on the name of this identifier and see who it is. With that one, it went less well. I thought it looks a bit different and it's a bit great. And maybe I was also dreaming a bit. So I put it as moose and asked some top experts what they thought. And it was very quickly, yeah, it's just another apodemos, seemingly not identifiable from that picture. Bad for my trip list, but good for my trip report because I don't put any wrong information out there. Now, one more thing I would like to show you is from this, what I think is a very pretty rodent that I observed in the Kilimanjaro area. And back then, 5 years ago, I identified it based on a paper as tropical ray rat, Otomys topicalis, quite a widespread species. Well, 1 year ago, Venkat came along and said, well, this looks more like Otomys sinki for me. And yes, it took a while, but after reading some papers, we both agreed, okay, it must be Otomys sinki. And this is a really nice species, despite the quite cute looks. Well, got the backside as well. It's always useful to upload everything you have, even if it's blurry. Despite being a quite cute species, it's also a really range-restricted one, being an endemic of Kilimanjaro area. And so it's probably my most range-restricted, though one of the rarest mammals I have seen in my life. And without a naturalist, I would have just forgotten probably about this rodent, would have put it down as tropical ray rat and not done anything about it. So this is really great. This is really an advantage of a naturalist, I think. And with that, as the last input, I hope you could take something out of this video I hope I could show you that there is some value in putting your records online, in making the most out of your observations, also for conservation. And as always, please feel free to leave some feedback at info@projectfelis.org, info@projectfelis.org. And with that, I would like to thank you for your attention, and I hope to meet you someday somewhere in the field.